Hey guys, what is up and welcome to a new Tesla update video. So today, as per usual, let's go over Tesla stock. Let's go over what happened today, what we can expect moving forward and all that good stuff. And as usual, I'll give you my personal thoughts moving forward. And yeah, let's just really jump right into it. So again, as usual, by the way, if you enjoy my analysis and whatnot and you want essentially more of it and essentially right as it's happening throughout the day, I do have a membership section on YouTube for just $2.99 a month. You get access to all of my thoughts, analysis, posts, etc. on Tesla and sometimes other stocks as well that I post about every single day that the market is open for just $2.99 a month. A lot of my members, I mean, hopefully they listen at least to some extent, should have avoided a lot of this pain down here, pretty much since the 260s over here because, well, I mean, that's what I've been pretty much talking about the most of the time. So even in the videos too, right? So, I mean, anyway, regardless, you get the point. Link is down below, or for $5, same thing. You get access to all of that, but also NVIDIA daily updates as well. So yeah, all that being said, let's jump right into it. Tesla closing the day down a whopping 9% almost on the day, closing at $217.80, which feels weird to say, doesn't it? Considering we were just talking about it being at 260 like 2 weeks ago or something like that. But remember how I said, you can go back to those videos. Like I just want to make, I don't want to like, again, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back or anything. I really want to like get it into people's head. The fact that there's this stock, and I've said this many times, is a master of FOMO. It's so freaking good at FOMO. I used to fall for it all the time as well. Like I'll be honest, like I used to fall for this FOMO pretty often, like maybe a couple of years ago or something like that, right? Honestly, probably even a year ago. But I've gotten a lot better at realizing the situation, essentially. Let's just say that. And technical analysis of course helped quite a bit with that. But remember how I said how back here people thought the same thing. If you told them it'll come down to like even as low as 180, they would have called you crazy. Or back here, 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 or back. You get the point, right? If you any of those points, any of those circles, you told people it'll be dropping like 30-40% from that moment, no one will believe you. But that's the reason, right? It's sheep. It's a game of sheep. Most people in the stock market are just sheep. They have no idea what they're doing. They're literally just blindly following along. You have Tesla bulls on Twitter or X constantly calling for outrageous price targets, and all the sheep just follow along with it, doing no thinking for themselves. And that's just kind of how the game works. And the market is designed to extract money from those kind of people that don't really put any effort in on their own end, right? That's just how it works. And I mean, this was just yet another example, right? I'm sure a lot of sheep followed in over here. They bought in at 260s. And well, we're now at 217. Now, obviously, if you have a long-term horizon and you're investing for the next several years, you're probably fine. But you could have got a better entry, right? If you were just a little bit more patient, at least from my perspective. And that's kind of what happened here. So let's talk about it. We had the Robotaxi event. We obviously crashed post-Robotaxi event because, well, yeah, there just wasn't enough information to say the least, right? It was cool. It was epic. I enjoyed it. I thought it was awesome. Cybercab looks pretty good. I'm a little bit mixed about it, I'll be honest, but I think overall it looks pretty cool. But again, there was just really no like actual new information. Probably the newest information that came out was the cyber van. Other than that, there was just really nothing of substance that wasn't already more or less known, other than some extra things. Like for instance, Elon said how before 2027 is their plan for the Robotaxi to really start getting deployed and being kind of mass production-ish. And of course, them deploying FSD unsupervised Texas, California, I think they said, he said next year. That was probably the only really new information. Otherwise, it was just pretty much everything that was already kind of expected to be shown. That's kind of why Tesla sold off, right? Obviously, that's part of the reason, right? We mentioned how also we did close below the channel, right? So that already was a bit of a sign of caution and warning. And well, we just pretty much, follow through on that much more aggressively, right? And let's talk about something else, right? Remember how I said we were in this little bear flag over here that looked something like this? Remember that? Remember this little bear flag? Well, again, if you take the pole of the bear flag, right, the bear flag was something like this, and then you measure it from the breakdown of the bear flag, which was pretty much right around here, you can see that the pole measures pretty much almost to perfection exactly where we ended up pretty much bottoming out today so far. So that's a pretty good sign. So in my opinion, this bear flag that we had from this initial fall in delivery numbers, sideways correction into continuation, pretty much played out. The bear flag has pretty much played out. Maybe we go a tiny bit lower, but for the most part, it's been, in my opinion, pretty played out, right? So that's a good sign. That bear flag has played out. But the thing that's not a good sign is, well, there's two major not good signs. So we'll talk about the bearish things, and then we'll talk about some bullish things. There are still some hope and signs for the bulls. That is a good thing. So let's talk about the bearish side first, right? Obviously we fell out of the channel. We fell out of the channel and we fell out before breaking above 270, right? I mentioned many times how we fall out of the channel before breaking 270. That is very, very concerning to me. Now, like I said, on the bullish side of the things, a few minutes later into the video, again, there are still some good things potentially brewing here for the stock, that there is still another like array of hope for the bulls, but this does give me some serious caution. Now, I did obviously buy the dip today, right? I am in a position, I already made some money on it, and I re-entered a bit, pretty much at market close once again. But there are some signs of major concern, I would say, because again, we essentially made a lower high and we broke out of the channel. And again, it was a massive channel. Breaking out of the channel this large, I'd be surprised if this is the only dip we get ultimately, right? I do think that this is a potential short-term bottom, roughly where we are right now. But again, similar to how I said when we had that gap down over here, we went sideways, how, usually there's more punishment behind that. You don't just gap down like that and not get punished even further. Honestly, this is similar. This is a similar case, right? You don't make a lower high like this in this channel, which is a very large channel, right? Right, you don't go like this high in this channel, pretty large channel, for like what, 2 months or something like that. The channel started in August and it pretty much ended in October, right? For like 2.5 months. I think this was early August. Actually, no, it was late August. Okay, so pretty much 2 months. You don't. Yeah, pretty much 2 months. You don't stay in a channel that long and then fall out without making a higher high of over here, without really getting punished for it, right? And that stock, I think, will honestly, I think it will get punished. Unfortunately, I do believe that there is more punishment to be had, assuming the bullish scenario doesn't play out, which I'll talk about very soon. And the more punishment is pretty simply, well, I think we ultimately will go lower. Now, again, like I said, I do think that we are at potentially a short-term bottom, which I'll talk about on the bullish side. But I do think ultimately what we get, best case scenario from here, in my opinion, is a bit of a dead cat up to, honestly, as high as, in my opinion, low 230s. That'll most likely turn into resistance, which I think will develop a bearish pattern. I'll talk about in a second here, ultimately to get rejected. And I think ultimately it most likely will head lower. And I think there's a damn good chance, like a pretty respectable chance. I don't want to say it's a guaranteed or it's 100%. No, absolutely not. But I think it's fairly likely that we do ultimately, at the very least, come down to low 200s, if not maybe even come back down to like the 180s to 170s, right? I do believe that has officially become a possibility, unfortunately. Like, it is what it is. I know it's not what people want to hear, but I really don't care what you want to hear. I'm here to obviously, as always, give you my personal thoughts, and I hope people respect that, right? I'm not trying to be a blind bull or a blind bear. I will always give you my personal thoughts, whether it's bullish or bearish, no matter what the case may be, on the stock itself. Company is a different story. The stock is a different story. Separate the two. Very, very important. So that's kind of the main thing I'm looking at. The main thing you can also eyeball really moving into next week, honestly, is these two yellow lines. The top yellow line is going to be the 100 EMA, right? The 100 exponential moving average, which is where we got rejected at today, and we couldn't close above it. That was the level I was hoping we would close above today, but we didn't. So that to me signals a little bit of potential hesitancy. On top of that, we also have the 200 EMA, which is sitting at, what is this? About 214, which was the bottom of the day. We bounced almost to perfection off of it as well. That's pretty much the two levels you want to look for. A daily closure above or below one of these most likely means we continue in that respective direction. And again, if we close above the 100 EMA above us, I think we'll most likely make our way back down to the low two, or back up to the low 230s. If we close below the 200 EMA, which would be very disappointing, well, the pain is not done yet, and we most likely head our way back down to a pretty much closer to $200 per share, which I'll talk about soon as to why that's a potential target. Now, let's talk about why this level very quickly can be potential bottom. So actually, no, before we do that, let's talk about one more bearish thing, which is going to be, of course, the weekly time frame here, which you already see a bit of a spoiler alert for a potential bull case scenario. But the thing I want to mention here is the fact that we officially closed the week back down below the multi-year trend line. And like I said, closing below the multi-week trend line after closing 2 weeks above it, in my opinion, is concerning as well. That's not a good sign. That is a sign of concern for me, which tells me that Tesla, I do think it's probably ultimately heading lower to 180s to 170s. I think there's a damn good chance of that, because now I view this as just a bull trap. I view this as a false breakout, and that's just not a good sign. In all honesty, that's kind of bearish, right? It is what it is, and that's just the way. It is what it is. That's just how I'm eyeballing it right now. Now, you can make an argument on the weekly time frame for the linear chart. We're pretty much right back at the channel, retesting it, right? That initial breakout that we had. But again, I don't put too much weight into the linear chart. Honestly, I might as well even delete it straight up, because I don't put too much weight into the multi-year trend line on the linear chart, because we already kind of discredited it from this move right here, where we just kind of went back and forth between it constantly. It puts a lot less weight, in my opinion, on this line, in my opinion. So I don't like it as much as I like this, and this to me shows pretty decent bearishness, in all honesty, over the next a few weeks potentially, or something like that. So anyway, let's talk about the bullish side. That's the bearish side. You know the drill, right? Ultimately, I do think that 170s, 180s actually becomes a realistic target now, and a pretty potentially pretty likely chance as well, sometime in November, let's say. Let's talk about the bullish side though. Again, it's not all bad news. There is some ray of hope for the bulls here, and I'll give you my personal thoughts about that, right? So why do we stop at this level, right? Why do we break down and then actually stop around this level? Well, first of all, it is an area of major support, 215-ish, right? We had major areas of support back here, major resistance here, some resistance support here, and as well over here. So it is a pretty important level, but there's more to it than that, right? Number one, obviously we had the bear flag. Like I mentioned, we had that bear flag. We ended up, playing out the pole almost to perfection, right? So bear flag essentially has been executed to perfection. It is now officially done. So that's another potential, negative catalyst finished, so the bulls can potentially get a bit more breathing room. So that's good. Another reason that we stopped at this level is, well, pretty simply, it's the Fibonacci retracement. Go from the swing low to the swing high that we had, back here in August to the recent one we had in September, end of September. And we have the Fibonacci levels, right? The first level we had that bounce off, like I said, as we were breaking out of the channel, was the 0.382. But it's pretty rare that, in my opinion, at least, that the 382 holds unless it's a very strong bullish momentum. And I just can't imagine it being as such if we're doing that after falling out of a massive channel. So I didn't expect it to hold. It didn't. We came right down to the 618 though. This is a pretty decent one. The 618 is a pretty decent level, a Fibonacci level to hold. And honestly, it wouldn't shock me if we come down a bit lower to somewhere in between the 618 to the 786, which is pretty much anywhere between here, today's low roughly, and about $200 per share. It wouldn't shock me if we do ultimately come back down there, right? But as of right now, we're pretty much holding the 618 Fibonacci, which is again pretty much today's low, which also lines up pretty well with that 200 EMA. So watch for this, right? If we start closing a daily candle below the pretty much the 200 exponential moving average, that to me shows further weakness, and there's a damn good chance we come down to about $204 to $200 per share, at which point that should be, in theory, a pretty decent bottom. And I think at some point we will get an overall bounce, right? Could be this area. If it's not here and we close below, it's the next step down, which, like I said, pretty much the very low 200s, 207, 203, 200, somewhere around that general vicinity would be that next range to watch out for. Now, what else is there to look at, right? RSI, I mean, we are very oversold. Now, Tesla is still bearish. It is still bearish. RSI is still pointing straight down despite it being oversold. Stochastic is still pointing straight down, but it is now also oversold. True strength indicator pointing straight down, but, this doesn't really have an oversold or overbought conditions, not that I'm aware of, but, it's towards the bottom of the range, I guess. But, regardless, still cross bearish. Somehow the BX trender is still making lower lows despite it's pretty low. It's still making lower lows though. So obviously the trend is still bearish. It's extremely bearish, actually, I would even argue. However, if there's a place for these signs for a potential, at least short-term reversal to start occurring, it would be pretty much roughly around here. Worst case, in my opinion, down closer to $200 per share for these, indicators to start curling back upwards and showing some either potential bullish divergences or really just crossing back to being bullish. For instance, stochastic, crossing back to kind of like bullish, kind of like what it did over here, for instance, right? Just, watch for those kind of signs start to slowly develop over the next week or so. The issue is we have earnings on the 23rd. So that's definitely a little bit of a head scratcher. I'm not going to lie. So we'll see how that plays out. But another way to look at it that maybe is a bit more simple is if we rally into earnings. So let's say we do bottom and we rally to 230s into earnings. I believe it'll be earnings will be a sell-off. However, if we end up selling even further off into earnings, let's say back down to 200 or low 200s, like 207, 205, 203, something like that, I believe earnings could actually be a decent buy the news type event essentially, and we can unwind some of that pressure. So I think one of those two scenarios will play out. But regardless which one plays out, whether it's this, and then we head down, or whether it's down a bit lower and then we rise up and then fall, I do think both scenarios will most likely ultimately lead to Tesla coming back down to about that 180s-ish range. Because again, it is what it is. Like you don't fall out of this massive channel like this without punishment. Like there's no way that I find it extremely hard to believe that this drop from this massive channel breakdown is it. That's it. We don't go any lower than that. Like I really do find that hard to believe. Again, you can have short-term bounces. We can potentially get that short-term bounce to 230s from here. That is a very real possibility. But again, I would look at that as nothing more than a dead cat before further continuation on weakness. It is what it is. Like again, I mean, hopefully I'm wrong, but I'd be pretty surprised if this is all there is to it, right? That's it. Pain's over, guys. We're at the bottom. I don't see it. I don't see it. I don't buy that theory. Now, one thing that can maybe give that some credibility, I guess, this is like the bulls' last hope, in my opinion. If we lose this potential scenario, I do think the bulls are in for a world of hurt, personally. is this, right? We could be on the weekly time frame setting up what could be a rising triangle, a weekly rising triangle, right? Rising triangle is a bullish pattern where essentially you can see here, as we're making higher lows, we're essentially having pretty much more or less equal highs around that 265-ish range, right? Where we keep getting rejected at the same range while making higher lows. So essentially you can see this trend line, we're pretty much right at the bottom of it. So again, similar to what I mentioned, the low of today / that 200 EMA, those are very crucial support levels that Tesla needs to hold. If we start closing down below that, Tesla will be weaker. I still think it'll get a bounce, right? So for instance, if we do close it below and we go to 200, I think we'll still get a bounce, probably for instance, back here, it'll be, back down all the way here, and then we'll probably come back up to retest it again, 220s, mid 220s, maybe low 230s if we're lucky. And all that'll be on the logarithmic chart is essentially a retest of this breakdown, which will coincide pretty well with what I'm talking about right here. But it'll look something like this, and then we ultimately make our way back down, right? That's kind of what I envision right now. That's one path. And again, the second path will be something like this. That's essentially what I envision right now moving forward for Tesla. One of those two paths, but ultimately they lead to a similar end result. Hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully that's not actually what happens, but I'd be pretty surprised if that doesn't happen over the next month or two. I'll be completely honest, because again, I'll say it again, and I'll say it as many times as I need to. You don't fall out of a channel like that without punishment. And again, it's a very large channel, right? The larger the channel you fall out of, the more punishment there is. In this case, it was a very large channel, couldn't make a higher high. It's time to get punished. It's time for the stock to punish the bulls, essentially, I guess. So that's the only way to put it, man. It is what it is. It is what it is. But yeah, hopefully I'm wrong. Hopefully this is the bottom, and hopefully we just rock it from here. There is a slight chance of it, I will admit. There is a very small chance that this is like the bottom. I just don't think it is, but there is a very small chance that that is, and this would be the pattern you'd want to look for, in my opinion, for that to be the case. But yeah, that's all I got for you today. Ladies and gentlemen, let me know what you think down below. As usual, I'll always give you my thoughts, whether you like them or not. Again, not to sound disrespectful, I honestly couldn't care less. I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to hopefully make money and hopefully help you guys make money. But it's not financial advice, of course. It's just me speaking out loud. This is a long video, but there's a lot to cover. Pretty massive day, obviously, to say the least. So yeah, let's see how it goes, ladies and gentlemen. You know what I'm looking for. You know roughly what I'm expecting. Hopefully it's been helpful, and let's just see what happens. But again, don't forget, Tesla on my time frames is extremely oversold. So if we do move down lower to like the low 200s, I don't think I'd be surprised if we go much lower, because regardless of my target down to 170s to 180s, it's not just go. I doubt it'll go straight down. That's usually not what happens. We'll get a bounce. I think we do get a bounce. It's just a matter of, does it bounce here or does it bounce down here? I think one of these two regions will bounce, and then I think from there we'll essentially just continue lower. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you for the next one. Peace.